Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to the Rules of Engagement. As always, I'll be your host, Nick, axslav, ranish. So take a look at some of the strategies and tactics used in game of Starcraft 2. Then we're going to take a look at a couple of games from yesterday's Challenger Group B. First, we're going to take a look at a fast-paced TvZ between Major and Killer. Then we're going to take a look at Zerg composition transitions between Vive and Bales, and then some solid PvT play in Major versus Bales. Of course, after these three segments will be the viewer Q&A, so submit any questions you have to me at axslav on Twitter, or put them in a comment under a YouTube video. Go to youtube.com/official MLGSA2, find any of the most recent Rules of Engagement videos, throw your question up on one of those, and I'll find it and answer it at the end of the next show. Our first segment is going to be fast-paced TvZ. First, we're going to talk about the clash of two aggressive builds and what kind of happens when both people go for aggressive builds. Then we're going to talk about knowing the goal of an engagement, how important that can be to make the best of an engagement. Then also how to properly, or when to know, when to avoid confrontation and how to accomplish that goal. So we're going to jump into this replay at the 7-minute mark. And the one thing we're going to take a look at is the builds of the two players. So again, this is going to be yesterday's match between Killer and Major, their first series. I believe this was game 3, the deciding game of the series, the first series. So we see Major doing something which is interesting, which is after he got the command center in the factory, instead of getting a third command center and one or two E-bays, or either one of those two options, he immediately adds in 2 more barracks, goes for stim pack, and is going for that Hellion stim marine timing, which is something we've seen. It's popular among some of the top Korean tiers. It's a very aggressive timing build. A bunch of Hellions to deal speeding, stim marines, and you can kind of just overpower the Zerg before they're ready. On the other hand, what Killer is doing is he's teching very fast. You notice no Bane Nest. At the 8-minute mark, the Spires are already halfway done. So that Spire started at 7:30 mark, which meant, of course, that layer was started at just shortly before the 6-minute mark. So a very fast tech by Killer. He's rushing up to meatless. Both players are cutting economy and tech to some degree to make this attack work, right? Major only has a single engineering bay. Killer's third is a bit later, and there's no evolution chambers for him. Major doesn't even have a third command center even started yet, so both players are doing very aggressive openings. And what's interesting is if one player does a super aggressive opening, other player does a slightly aggressive opening, you basically, the guy who does slightly aggressive opening just adopts the role of the macro opening. He just scouts it and realizes he has to be on defense. But when both players do openings, they're almost equally aggressive. For example, we see here the worker counts are roughly even to where you think they'd be for a normal game. Zerg's up a little bit of workers. Neither player has insane upgrades. The third base for the Zerg is done, but there's no drones there. Turn has a darter third base. Both players are roughly equally aggressive. It comes down to who can actually take the map control. And what's super important here is we notice Major's moving out right now and Stim's already done. Ideally, he would be already across the map and attacking right now. So if we take a look at this, that means you have to move out about half a minute earlier. So if you rewind, it's just about half a minute, the 9:10 mark. Ideally, right now, or in fact, he can even go earlier. We could say you can move out at 8:50 mark. When Stim is 30 seconds from being finished, you can start moving out. Unfortunately, there's 2 things that interrupt him. One is the fact that a lot of these Marines are getting stuck as they're being rallied out, so he has to lift this up before he moves out. Another reason is that he just decides not to move out quite as early. He wants to hit with +1 weapons. And his weapons upgrade isn't timed perfectly with his stim pack. He got the eBay slightly late to really execute this build to the best of his ability. And so what all this means is that because his timing is just 20-30 seconds late, as he's crossing the map, the mutalisks are already in production. Many of these are already out. Oops, sorry. My screen's actually lost the mouse. There we go. The mutalisks can already start picking off damage. You're picking off a Hellion or 2. They picked off 1 Hellion there. They can pick out a Marine. Of course, they regenerate. They can come over here, pick off another Hellion. And every single unit is so important. 6 Hellions, all of a sudden, the speedies can't do much. Even taking out this Widow Mine here, that's huge too. All these things add up to the fact he had used his stim early. He lost a couple of Hellions. All of a sudden now, Killer can easily deal with this with speedings because there's nothing to kill the speedings very efficiently. There's only 4 Hellions. There was no Widow Mine. And so with the Marines down, the Metas could easily overwhelm. From here going forward, now Killer has the map control, right? And so he can out-expand his opponent. His third base is set up. Not many drones there yet, but he can go ahead and drone that up because he can just contain Major to 2 bases for such a very long time. Major's third is just now finishing. but with his unit count, with only 12 Marines, it's all he basically has to defend 2 bases, let alone think about moving out to take a 3rd. Not to mention, if he wants to be competitive in the mid-game, he's going to have to start to armory in 2nd eBay fairly soon as well. So if you're both going aggressive builds, whoever can take map control is going to have the advantage because they can out-expand their opponent. So he's just going to do, he's going to contain Major for a little bit. Of course, Meatless trying to be annoying, trying to keep the Marines in the main. If the Marines are in the main, it's hard for Major to move out and take that 3rd base. And then behind us, that's where the 12 drones come into production, so you can really utilize this 3rd base to the most of its potential. We can see you're also trying to catch up on upgrades. Whereas Major, because he's contained 2 bases for so long, he's having a hard time getting that armory in 2nd eBay up in time to maintain that upgrade advantage. So now going forward here, we can see this, the fact that Killer's been ahead on a base for a long time because he's had so much map control, is going to result in him having a little bit of not that much of a food advantage right now if you look at the supplies. He's only about 15 supply ahead, but the big advantage is in army size, right? The Zerg army size is so much bigger than the Terran army size, and the big question is if you look at 2 things, right? Why are the foods only about 20 apart, but the army sizes are, you know, like 1.5 times bigger? And then, okay, maybe Major has much more workers than Killer. Well, that's not actually true. In fact, Killer has more workers than Major. The reason why Killer's army is so much stronger, as far as this amount of gas and oops, let me go back to army tab. The reason why the Zerg army is so much more stronger, almost twice as strong, if not more than that, is because the composition. If you take a look at the units tab, then you can see the composition. It's all Banings and Mulas. Each Baning is only half a supply, and each one costs 50 minerals and 25 gas, whereas the Terran supply is predominantly Marines. And each Marine is twice the supply of Baning, 1 supply instead of half a supply, and it's cheaper. So that's why you see the situation where Killer is actually way ahead in army value, even though the supplies are kind of close. And using the army value, he can go ahead and try to hit this nice little timing attack, which is going to be a mass speed baiting attack on a 3rd base of the Terran, right? So yeah, there's a ton of speed baitings, or as soon as speed completes, a ton of speed baitings, so he can go and hit this 3rd. And this is where it's very important to know the goal of an engagement. So his goal here, earlier, map control, delayed a 3rd. Now, okay, he's taking this 3rd base. I want to deny that with a mass speed baiting attack. So notice this. Instant he's going in, he sends the baitings, most of them towards the Marines, force the Marines to retreat. The Mutas, they're not going after the turret. They're not going after SCVs, going straight for the orbital. Because the goal of this attack is to deny the 3rd base. And if you can kill the orbital, that denies the 3rd base for about 2 minutes. You kill SCVs, it's nice. You kill other things, it's nice. But the real goal is kill that orbital command. Once you kill that, they're getting on the 2 bases. As long as you keep the Mutas alive, right? You don't want to lose those very expensive units, the Mutas. You can afford to lose some speedings. You can afford to lose some banings. Ideally, don't lose too many. But keep the majority of Mutas alive, and ideally kill the orbital. If it's not possible, if there's too many units guarding it, you don't want to obviously attack it if you're just going to lose your units trying to do so. But if it is vulnerable, go for that immediately. That's the ideal goal. And again, going straight for that 3rd orbital is trying to be rebuilt, taking that out yet again. Now here at a situation where Killer is significantly ahead, right? I mean, if you look at economy, he's up by 20 workers. He has 4 bases versus only 2 of the Terran opponent. If you look at the army value, his army value is far ahead as well. But the one thing that can always turn the game around is widow mines. So we can see here, oops, let me do that screen again there. As he's coming in here, 1 single widow mine, all of a sudden right there, kills all these banings. 16 kills, almost all banings. And all of a sudden, that's half the army. Another widow mine comes up here, all these banings, boom, they go down as well. And now all of a sudden, it's the army's just crippled from his 2 widow mine hits. So Killer had basically a game that most people would say is 100% won. And now, yes, he sells the economic advantage, but going back to the army temp, after losing those banings, the armies are now almost exactly even. And that's not where Zerg wants to be unless they're at Hive Tech, because Zerg units tend to be not quite as cost efficient as the Terran units. So now we're in a situation where Killer still has an advantage, but all of a sudden, it could go either way. And he just realized I was so far ahead, a couple banings took out the majority of my army, or a couple widow mines, excuse me, took out the majority of my army. So I still have the advantage, but if that happens again, I may just lose the game entirely. All it takes is another 1 or 2 big hits like that, and I could lose the game entirely. So this is where Killer has to make up his mind and say, you know what? I know that these Widow Mines are the way I can lose the game. I'm still ahead by enough that the only way I'm going to lose is like if a couple more of those big Widow Mine hits hit me. And so the best way to avoid that is basically to use constant counterattacks. To say, you know what? I don't want to try to necessarily totally stop your army from killing me. You know, if I can take out the army, great, if it's small. But I don't want to commit myself to having to stop these pushes. So if just a few Marines, like in this case, he's going to go ahead and stop it. But as more Marines come up, and there's still a few Widow Mines, player's going to realize, you know what, going head-to-head, the potential for a big Widow Mine hit is too much. Instead of trying to necessarily defend the 4th, I can just say, it's okay. Once I get to Hive Tech, the Widow Mines aren't as big a deal because of Ultras. Now, Widow Mines are still good against Ultras, but they're not like an instant game changer against Ultras, whereas they are against Banelings, Speedlings, and Mulas. So instead he's saying, instead of just trying to fight the battle and maybe losing the Widow Mines, let's go for these constant counterattacks. If I can make sure he never has a 3rd base, I can afford to just give up ground to his army. I can afford to let him slowly push forward here and take out this, as long as I constantly deny the 3rd base. So we see here as Major pushes in, you know, he's going to try to delay for as long as possible, but as the Widow Mine count increases and more of those guys crawl up there, another big Widow Mine hits to take out some more Banelings. He's very afraid of losing to just a couple big Widow Mine hits. So going forward here, he's going to say, you know what? It's okay, this hatchery, I can afford to lose it. Ideally, I want to defend it, but if I can't, we can afford to lose that as long as we prioritize never letting Major get his own 3rd base. And then eventually, even without much economy, if he doesn't have economy, he wants to get a few Ultras, I'll run over his army because he's not going to have a big army. He won't have the money to switch over to Marauders to get a huge army. As long as I constantly go after this 3rd base with these speeding attacks. Never let him get that. So again, a 4th base speeding on my Major. Killer says, it's okay. I don't want to risk maybe there's Widow Mines in a composition instead of trying to fight that. Constantly counterattacking, going for the base trade, saying, we'll both play low econ. And I know I'm teching to Ultralists is a big reason why this works. And so eventually I'll be able to get up these Ultralists, and then once these 5 Ultralists pop, then let's see your big Widow Mines turn the game around. And that's exactly what's going to happen. You can see he's just letting the 4th die. Again, he's just going to let this 4th die. It's not a big deal. But then all of a sudden now he's at the point where he has all the Ultras starting to be produced. They're out here now. And now he can go ahead and defend a 3 base. And again, remember, constantly denying his opponent's 3rd base. That's the important part. It's okay for the Zerg to lose his bases as long as those counterattacks are denying the Terran 3rd base as well. And then the Ultras come up and they clean up everything. Overseer comes up, kills the Widow Mines. And then, I mean, this game's over, right? He has twice the supply. Income, Major only has 600 income, and that's just basically off of a mining base here that, as we can see, he's going to deny that again. As soon as he denies that, the mining goes basically 0, and it's going to be game over as soon as he can defend his base. So that was a really cool game. The two couple things I want to reinforce in your minds, the reason why Killer won that game is 2 big things. One is that Major's timing attack wasn't streamlined. So coming at this from perspective, you got to streamline your timing attacks. If you're going to do a timing attack, Major's hit 30 seconds later than ideally it would have hit. It just can't work at the level they're playing at. If it's a timing attack, it has to be perfect because it has to have that timing. The idea is that attack, it either denies the 3rd before your opponent has any type of speed banings or any type of high number banings, or the goal of that attack is you do crippling damage to the Zerg player right as the Mutas spawn. You force them to fight before they have too many speedings. Unfortunately, the Mutas were already across the map about halfway mark, and you were able to pick off a lot of the key units that attack before it hit. Not to mention the fact there's about 20 more speedings available for Killer because the attack was 30 seconds later. So you gotta streamline those timing attack builds. If you want to, you watch Party, watch Innovation, watch those guys, just copy their builds to the letter for timing attacks. Those have to be perfect. Then, of course, as a Terran player, if you're ever behind or even if you're ahead, use Widow Mines against Speedings, Banelings, and Mutalists. We saw how he almost made a comeback with some really big Widow Mine hits. Imagine if he wasn't playing from behind, if he never lost that 3rd orbital, how effective the game would have been with those Widow Mines. And then finally, also as a Zerg player, if you're ever ahead but you're afraid to lose the Widow Mines, make sure you're taking hard to get those Ultralists. You can try to use counterattacks until you get the Ultralists to buy enough time to get those out in the field before the game is decided. So wraps up our first segment. We'll take a short break and be right on to our second segment. It's going to be a game about Vibe versus Bales.